As always, there's some very big things that happened in the last several days. There's number one, Grok 3 dropped. I want to ask the panel here, how does this impact Tesla? You've got India, Giga India, possibly coming up into conversation again. Elon Musk met with Prime Minister Modi last week. And then now there's, 2 showrooms, apparently, that Tesla's going to set up in New Delhi and Mumbai. They're hiring 13 new job openings for sales and service and customer support. What is happening there? You got early deliveries of Model Y. So that's coming out next week already at Tesla China, they're reporting. And there's a few more things like Cybertruck safety. And Rivian may not get their $6 billion factory that they were promised. But we'll see what happens there. Let's get started with Grok 3. I think that's the biggest one. It was announced last night, right? The Grok 3 is the largest supercomputer in the world, number one. They are now talking about 200,000 H100 equivalent compute power. Elon said that they're actually already in process of building the next one, which is going to be 5 times more powerful. And they believe that Grok 3 is going to be the most powerful, smartest AI that's out there. We're going to see how it compares to the, how it in the chatbot arena and so forth. But apparently, it's looking like it's right up there. And then they're going to have voice mode coming up next week. And that lets you speak to this. It's got reasoning. It's got the ability to do deep search, be able to get into other websites and so forth. So this sounds promising. Elon is claiming that this Grok 3 is going to be, once it adds on the reasoning and the ability to think of its answers, once it adds that on, it's going to be the smartest AI out there, and that it's going to be pretty unlikely that anyone else will actually beat it in the future because they are just so fast in building in the larger supercomputers out there as well. So, Alexandra, why don't we start with you? Are you following this at all, or do you have an opinion on how this might impact Tesla?
I did follow it a little bit. Yeah, I did follow it a little bit, but much more with the eye on whether Tesla should invest, whether it's getting late for the investment, because that's obviously my angle much more. I'm no good in judging whether, how phenomenal this is compared to something else. That's I leave that to you tech guys. That you'll know that all much better than me. I actually looked at it since yesterday on 2 fronts. One, is the board of Tesla making progress towards a shareholder vote where we can vote whether we want to invest in xAI? And I'm annoyed and frustrated by the time that is that is flowing, because in the meantime xAI, as all AI companies, has just taken so much more value, so we're just getting much less for our 5 or 6 billion that we're going to throw into it. So but it is what it is. I mean, there's obviously procedures, and I hope that we're getting further to that. And the second aspect I looked at it is, why in the world would Elon or a consortium of people led by Elon make a bid to OpenAI if he has the best tool, right? And if he's convinced of having the best tool, and I think he is right in being convinced that it's the best tool. So my view on that is that whole bid, we talked about it a long time, Herbert, when we did the special, was really there to mess up the whole OpenAI structure and put on the table that either you stay a non-profit and we're all good, or you're a for-profit, but now you have this bid that you have to take into account. And so the cheap version where Altman tried to get the assets from the non-profit into the for-profit for 40 billion, that's impossible now, right? Because there's just this 97 billion bid on the table that can't be ignored. And it's probably worth much more, but what was, dear to his heart was that he would get it cheap. And so, that reconfirmed to me that he doesn't really want OpenAI. He just wants to be the troublemaker there, and he's very smart in doing so.
Alexandra, did you see this thing that an article came out just a couple days ago? They said that xAI is discussing to raise $10 billion at $75 billion valuation. So if xAI is worth $75 billion, then OpenAI should be worth around 97 billion, right?
Well, at the last capital raise for OpenAI, it was 156 billion, but that was only for if I recall it right, 6 billion that they get. When you do capital raises and the amount that you collect is relatively small, I mean, of course, 6 billion is a lot of money, but it is relatively small. And I'm proven right because they're going for another tranche now. But when you're going for this relatively small tranches, the valuation is often exaggerated just because you have a multitude of relatively smaller partners in there. So it was at 156. Now, if OpenAI is truly at 156, which it was for the 6 billion raised in December, then XAI at 75 billion is undervalued in my view. And that's where my frustration comes, because if we want 5 or 6 billion as Tesla investors in there, more it raises in value, less we'll get for that money. And that's where it comes from. But clearly at 75 billion, it looks to me too cheap.
Alexandra, is there nothing that Tesla investors can do today to try to be part of this tranche, this 10 billion raise at this point that's happening now?
Not via Tesla. I mean, if you are an accredited investor and have enough money, you may be able to get into the, you have to speak to people financial advisors who are specialized in this field. What was Tesla Daily's name? Sorry, Robert.
Maurer.
Yeah, maybe Rob would be somebody to approach if you have a lot of money and want to put that into it. But our best bet would be to do it as a Tesla investment. But with all this going on, I didn't say the word. With all this going on in Delaware, we had to have this special committee set up. You remember how it all went for last year's second shareholder vote on the compensation package? It has to be a special committee. The special committee has to come up with a conclusion. So in this case, it would be a conclusion where it says, yes, it would be great to invest in XAI, and that's a good valuation where for Tesla it would make sense. Then it has to go to the board, and the board has to decide that, yes, we want to bring it forward to a shareholder vote, and then a shareholder vote has to happen. Now, this year's annual shareholder meeting, I think, will be in June again. Could be earlier, could be like beginning of May, but I do believe it will be in June again. There's a rhythm between the shareholder meetings that has to be respected, except if you have special, really big reasons to do it at a different point of view. And I don't think now by middle of February that they will have good enough a reason to do something earlier. So in 3 to 4 months, we may have that question in the proxy for the shareholder meeting. So that proxy will come out in April, in 2 months. And I do think they work on it, because we actually saw a couple of paperwork with the SEC that showed clearly that they were making the cleaning out between some other shareholder proposals that came out and wanted them to be dismissed, not to have to include them on the proxy, which is normal. This is normal beginning of the year stuff, but it just shows that they're working on the proxy. So to make it easier, my response: if you have a lot of money and an accredited investor, reach out to people like Rob Maurer and try to get a tranche if that's what you want to. If you're not an accredited investor, or if you just feel Tesla should do this for us, because Tesla will need Grok 3, right? Grok 3, in my view, is going to be the interface that's going to allow us to speak to the car. And so if that is your opinion as well, then we have to hope that we get as soon as possible the board to put this on the agenda of a shareholder vote.
Okay, I appreciate that. I mean, so okay, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that if this is the primary user interface, voice to both the bots and the cars, Tesla shareholders should own XAI, especially now that it's the largest supercomputer in the world. Nick Gibbs is here. And Nick, great to have you, because what was it, 6 months ago, you said that LLMs are a commodity. You don't think Tesla should own XAI. You don't even think it's worth that amount. Do you still feel the same way?
Yeah, that's sort of what I said. Yeah, in big scale, yeah, I do still feel that way. I think LLMs are being commoditized right now. They're going to get better and better over time, but I don't think that's where any of the true revenue will be realized. Even now, agents are actually actionable, no pun intended there, compared to just an LLM, right? That's an LLM. You still need the human in the loop to do the Q&A, whereas agents can actually streamline things for you. I'm actually literally in the process of building. I mean, I was just in Seattle last week building a whole bunch of well, I don't want to talk too much about that, but anyways, the point is agents are the more interesting part, and so it'll be interesting to see what XAI does on that in that capacity, and so that would be more of a interesting topic. In the meantime, with regards to Grok 3, I finally got access to it here. I've been playing with it in Chatbot Arena, but I finally got access to it here, and so it's definitely interesting. It seems more. And again, I've literally been playing with it for like 3 minutes while you and Alexander are talking, but it seems less Deloitte-ish. I don't know how else to say that. I feel like a lot of these LLMs speak like they're part of some GSI, like PwC, Deloitte. No shade to them, but this is what it sounds like. Whereas Grok 3 sounds more just human, more natural. So I think that's pretty interesting. But yeah, long story short, I don't think I for Tesla itself, I still don't really see the value of investing something like Grok. Like for what everybody wants within the car, I still think that Tesla could create their own LLMs for that. I don't think there's that much crazy functionality that would be needed. Maybe if you start talking about more advanced things like, hey, pull over here, you can stop here, or hey, that's my friend up there on the left. That's who we're trying to pick up. Like things like that become more nuanced. But even then, for something like that, you're not going to want the latency to the cloud, which is what would have to happen right now with anything like Grok 3. And Elon said that as much. So I don't know. I'm kind of up in the air. I still think for the vehicles, you could maybe, I don't know how big the mini version would be, but something more lightweight could be on the car for latency reasons. But I don't think you need the totality of the internet in the vehicle to be what we need for a robotaxi. But I could be wrong. My mind could be changed. So
Interesting that you have a contrarian view, as you often do. But boy, I'm completely on the other side. Curious to see how, Omar, how do you view Grok 3? How important is it? And then how does it relate to a Tesla investor?
Yeah, pretty incredible presentation last night by the XAI team. And I don't think anybody expected that they would announce that they were #1 on the LMSys leaderboard, with users essentially just putting in queries, not seeing which model generated the response and picking the best one. XAI was the best, and not just the best, but the best in every category, which hasn't happened for a while. You've had sort of different models winning different categories. So it's incredible work. I think it speaks to the vertical integration they have here. And man, Elon Musk is just like the AI godfather. I mean, he was one of the founders of OpenAI. He's been talking for a long time about AI safety. And I don't think anybody expected when you started XAI 19 months ago or so that they would be putting out models that beat OpenAI. I mean, of course, this space is moving so fast and there are so many entrants that I'm sure OpenAI is going to put out better models, Google will put out better models, and they'll kind of move around in the leaderboards. But XAI is in the game in a serious way here, and just sort of building out the infrastructure themselves and the pace at which they've been able to do that. That's why I think they're going to continue to be a serious contender. And, Elon believes that no one's going to be able to beat them. So that's going to be really exciting to be built into our Tesla products as well, for Tesla vehicles, for Optimus. Of course, language models are a commodity. You can still go download DeepSeek or download Llama or download whatever, and Tesla could even use those in their product. But obviously, the integration they're going to be doing with XAI, starting with just using the API, but eventually, they can really design things together, design it to run on their chips, come up with a solution that really works well together. And I think that's going to launch with voice mode in Teslas. It'll probably be important for robo taxis, but Yeah, I mean, it's pretty incredible just coming out of nowhere. And now they've got what I think is the most advanced self-driving system in the world. They've now got the most advanced LLM. And Tesla owners are going to have not just a good LLM, but the best LLM available in their vehicles.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this is just, it's the brains. This is not just, yes, it's a commodity. When you think about it as question and answer for, answers to questions, but this is going to go way beyond that. I just can't imagine at this point that this is going to stay as a commodity and you can just grab whatever, because we're talking about the features and functions that it's going to be able to do. That's going to go way beyond just, again, recognition of vision, helping create simulation data, being able to understand a context, right? So when it goes in front of a mailbox and knows it's a mailbox, those kind of things. Curious what you think, Sat. You had your hand up.
Oh, I wanted to comment on about the investment side that it's really difficult to get in to invest in any of these types of companies that's like bot and humanoid or LM related investments, because we all know one of these companies is going to be the biggest thing, the next biggest thing. So even XAI, when they took in the first 6 billion, they could have actually taken way more. So it's not like you as an investor have a choice. You're actually the one begging to invest in it, because the companies are like, which investors do we want? Because they're going to choose the investors that's going to be supportive of their mission, not just the money. It's not about just about the money in investing. So it's a different kind of realm we're in right now, that these companies are basically being able to choose, and then they can limit how much the investment there's plenty more that people want to invest in. So if other entities or companies like Tesla invest and we're invested in, that's probably the fastest way in some aspect to indirectly invest in them. But even as a credit investor, you have to be in the chosen group to be able to be invest in these great companies.
Are you guys concerned at all that we haven't, like, the XAI is talking about 200,000 H100 equivalent compute power that they've already built, they're using today. They're building the B200. It's going to be 5 times more powerful. We haven't heard the plans for Tesla's Cortex and what that plan is and how that's going to go. Obviously, it's good news, right? Because if XAI can do this, then Tesla should be able to do this as well. It's transferable. Same, team can even help. Much more likely than not. But we haven't heard how fast Tesla themselves plans to grow. You guys have an opinion on that? Nick or Omar? No?
Yeah, I mean, Tesla has adopted a pretty similar strategy to XAI, and they're leveraging the same expertise, obviously. They are running their own data center. They're not going out to AWS or Google Cloud. They've actually built a facility at Giga Texas. They call it Cortex. And they have a chart here that they included in Q3. This was the last time they included this forecast. So, according to this, they should be north of 50,000 GPUs right now. They mentioned 100,000 as the target for the Cortex facility. Once they ramp up to the 100,000, I expect they'll begin work on adding another 100,000. And they really have probably a comparable amount to XAI, because in addition to the Cortex cluster, they have GPUs in California, GPU, an A100 cluster. But in terms of having one big continuous cluster built out in Texas, that's really going to be the key to training some of these larger models, especially as they go to unsupervised. So I would expect to see Cortex following in much the same way that the XAI data center is. Of course, XAI is a private company. They don't have needs for profitability or anything like that. They're able to get a higher valuation just by spending and building as fast as possible, training the model with as little delay as possible. Tesla has some more constraints on their CapEx, but yeah, I expect them to get to 200,000 GPUs and beyond in Texas. I think the reason why they didn't include this chart that I have at the tweet up there in their last call was that this was during the sort of DeepSeek market panic, if you remember what was happening during this week. And there was this false idea that everybody who spent money on compute is just wasting it. And it turns out we don't need compute. Since then, the market's kind of woken up. NVIDIA's back near, much higher levels. And, perhaps that's why they didn't include it. But I would expect that they're following in XAI's footsteps and building 100,000. And they've confirmed 100,000. I expect them to expand that to 200,000 and beyond this year.
Great answer, by the way. Okay, yeah. So let's go to Simon first, and then Nick. Simon. Simon, we can't hear you.
Sorry, you can hear me okay?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Sorry. As usual, my kids are at swim lessons, so I hope it's not too loud here. So for some context, I come to this space to hear everybody's perspective, and it's amazing, and I really appreciate it. And so what I can give back is my perspective. It doesn't mean it's right. It doesn't mean it's wrong. It's just, here's the perspective, and it's a shared group analysis of this. But so a couple of things when I listened to this last night, in terms of, I was blown away that they're already completing the 200 H100 GPU clusters, and they're actually, it's completed, and they referenced that they were on their way to building, in the middle of building, a 1 million GPU cluster. So that like, I fell off my chair when I heard that. Now, so where am I going with this? Is I don't think that so first of all, please don't hate me for this. I think that this was a chess strategic move with Elon Musk and XAI to divert, and similar to, we're making a bid for XAI, to make a bid and take resources. So this is I work in capital markets, and you need an insane amount of capital in order to build the compute. And so if you're an investor out there in your private equity shop and you've got a ton of money to allocate, and all of a sudden Elon has complicated the deal with XAI because he said, hey, if this thing does not become if this thing becomes a for-profit entity, we're going to buy it, and we're going to buy it for more than twice what Sam Altman wanted to buy the nonprofit for. And if somebody wants to buy it for more, we will match that bid. So that all of a sudden takes away a whole bunch of capital. But then they want to raise capital. And if I'm an allocator of capital and I want to invest in AI, you want to go to the leader. So XAI was sucking up the market in terms of taking capital away to buy chips. And I want to put two things out there. I think the whole purpose of this, I think it was launched a bit early. And that's why Elon mentioned on the call, hey, it's going to get better within the next week. We're still sort of there, but trust me, it's going to get better. If you want the really good version, it's going to be wait a week or two. But I think that's going to dry up capital competition. And I say this because then I heard another topic where they're talking about how they built out the factory. And they found an old Electrolux factory, and on one side they put the generators. I don't know if anybody knows how they're generating that power, but that's an insane amount of power, and that's not the most efficient, most effective. But what Microsoft is doing is they're building nuclear reactors, miniature ones, and it takes a lot of time to get these approved. And Elon recognizes that you need to get power instantly, and you need to get the compute up instantly. And he won in terms of building. There's nobody that can build mass scale production better than Elon Musk. And he did that. Was it the most efficient? No. I'd love to hear where he's going to get the power for the million GPU, but I wouldn't bet against Elon. Why I'm pointing that out is that this is a rush to get to be the leader and to dry up the capital from the likes of XAI, who are already sucking a lot of capital
OpenAI.
from the market. OpenAI, sorry,
Mm-hmm.
OpenAI. Thanks. And so that was my takeaway from last night. How it relates to Tesla, I actually am curious because I think I heard Herbert on one of your other podcasts. Like, what do you do with that compute once they build out another cluster that's 1 million GPUs? What do you do with the other 200? Do they rent it out to Tesla, and Tesla's able to use that at a fraction of the cost? I don't know. I do think that, and I put it into Grok earlier today, that Grok will be available to Tesla vehicles by the end of the month, according to Grok. So that would be really cool.
Mhm.
But yeah, just to put it out there, that this isn't about Tesla. I think it's a race to suck up capital in the capital markets, and also to suck capital away from or cut, OpenAI off at the knees. And it was last week. It was basically a stab in a wound stab. This week, it was like, you're done.
Mhm.
There's no more capital going to your company. We've proved on every metric that we have the best model and we can improve more efficiently, more effectively, and more rapidly. This wasn't a thing of Tesla. This was putting a nail in the coffin for OpenAI.
Wow, that's very important thought there. Thank you, Simon. Let's come back to that idea that you had. Brian Wang had brought that up, saying that, when XAI has done with their 100,000 H100 equivalent compute, and then they move on to the B200s, could they give that space to Tesla? He thinks it is. But Nick, you had your hand up first.
Yeah, I wasn't going to talk about that. I don't.
Oh
think
yeah, Omar
that's-
laughed though, so we'll get him to answer it later. Go ahead, Nick. Though.
Yeah, I won't say what I think he's going to say, but I do have a question for anybody and everybody. So unlike you all, it was 11 something my time when I was watching it over here on the East Coast, and I was a little less than sober. But am I crazy, or did it seem like Elon insinuated that they put in some I guess fake
Simulation data.
reasoning to essentially, I think what he was alluding to was to prevent anyone from distilling what they're doing. Like, am I crazy, or did I hear that correctly last night?
He said that they hid the reasoning because you can actually click on an area and have it opened up, and you can actually see step by step how this computer's the Grok is thinking. But I don't know if I heard him say fake. I just said that they hid certain areas because they don't want people to just copy it straight out. That's what I heard.
Yeah, that's still, yeah. I don't know. I wish we could talk more to them about it because,
but it wouldn't surprise me that he would put something fake, because isn't that what they do with their letters to employees? And then they can tell exactly every single letter is slightly different with a dot here and a space there, and they can actually know who leaked some letter.
Yeah, but I guess what I was getting at is I think that wouldn't prevent you from distilling it. So I don't know. I was just curious. I don't feel like sitting there watching the whole thing again. But it was really
Omar,
impressive.
Yeah, you laughed when I said that Brian Wang believes that you can actually share the compute once you're done with it.
Yeah. So I mean,
yeah.
So first off, on obfuscating the thoughts, right? So it essentially has like this thought trace where you say, okay, I want you to think about this for a while, essentially run inference and come up with a bunch of text, but this is essentially your internal monologue, right? Some of the leading models like OpenAI O1 and O3 have done it. And they let you see what those thoughts of Grok are. You can click and you can see them, just like DeepSeek, but they obfuscate them a little bit. So they don't give you exactly what the raw thoughts are. They kind of essentially run it through an LLM to give you something that still shows you what it was thinking, but it hides some of the information to make it a little bit harder to copy. Now, in terms of Grok 3, knowing when Grok for Tesla is going to be released, LLMs don't have any special insight into future product plans, right? They'll sometimes just make things up. So you don't want to, it can't predict the future. It doesn't know certain things. So I wouldn't take that too seriously. I do think they are going to have Grok. And then, in terms of being done with compute, like, oh, we built a new cluster, we're done with the old one. That's not something that ever really happens. They need all the GPUs and more and more. I mean, they talked about at the event scaling up pre-training, which is just, throwing more GPUs on the pre-training stage. But then they also talked about test time scaling. So, okay, what if you could allow the model to think for longer? What if you could have the model actually run through several different chains of thought and then have a model evaluate all of them and figure out, after looking at all the different, 10 different models, sort of thinking through the problem, look at all 10 and figure out, which one makes the most sense. So there's endless ways to use this compute. They're not going to be in a position where they need to find someone to use it. And Tesla and XAI are separate companies. Tesla's building their own compute cluster. It's called Cortex. XAI is building their own compute cluster for their own purposes. So, I would expect the relationship to be Tesla will maybe use XAI's API, but they're each going to maintain their own compute clusters for their own purposes, unless at some point in the future they merge.
Yeah, they definitely will. But I think there was an article, and again, who knows if they were right or wrong. They did report that Tesla is using some of their FSD training is actually having an XAI supercomputer.
No way.
I would bet money that's not true.
I mean, they literally built their own massive supercomputer in Giga Texas for this exact purpose. They're legally separate entities. They can't share money with each other. XAI is owned by XAI investors. Tesla's owned by Tesla investors. Any sort of relationship between the two companies has to be at arm's length. They're, completely separate organizations. And Tesla has $33 billion in the bank. There's no need for them to borrow someone else's computer. They're building all the compute they need in-house, much the same way XAI is.
I would also say that
That's a good point, Homar. Go ahead, Nick.
I was just going to say, I think Tesla's they're kind of getting to like a logarithmic stage where they're not really compute constrained. I could be wrong. I'm completely guessing here. I acknowledge that. But based on what I'm experiencing, again, I'm geographically biased here. We got great roads here, great weather, all that. But based on what I'm experiencing, it seems like they're not necessarily, the compute's not the problem. It's not the limiting factor for them to get to a robotaxi. I think now it's just about polishing. And so I think you kind of see that need for compute maybe not as much pedal to the metal, whereas XAI is still in an arms race, essentially. I think with Tesla, it's a little different. Now it's about polishing and refining and making this, a client-facing product rather than how do we solve the problem? How do we actually, figure out what we need? Are we at another top of a mountain and we noticed, hey, this isn't the right architecture. Here's another mountain we have to surface. So I think they're in two different spaces at this point, and I don't think compute is the determining or limiting factor for Tesla anymore.
Well, ARK Invest, they did their research and they just released that. And they had this table that says they believe that Tesla will get to 10,000 miles between critical disengagement, which is equivalent to one person driving for an entire year, and you get a critical disengagement. I can't remember the exact number, but something like when they get to 100,000 GPUs. And then when they get to 200,000 GPUs, compute equivalent, that's when they'll get to the 70,000, which is equivalent to safe as a human, which they think is going to happen in October of this year. I mean, they may be wrong, but it's just they're basically using the amount of compute to get to the miles between critical disengagement factor. That to me makes a lot of sense. Do you guys disagree with that?
I would say it's a dramatic oversimplification. You know, there is going to be some correlation between compute increasing and the performance of the system, but simply buying GPUs and putting them in your data center isn't going to do anything. So there's a lot more to it in reality. I wouldn't take that rule of thumb very seriously at all. But I mean, Tesla's compute needs are going to increase dramatically, as are everybody's. Um, you know, they mentioned on the earnings call, Optimus is probably going to take 10 times more compute to train than FSD. And FSD, as it scales around the world, as we start adding other countries, the training needs of that system, as the models get larger and larger, it's going to continue to increase as well. So long term, Tesla's going to have really millions of H100 equivalents of compute. But the systems are also getting faster, right? So as NVIDIA does their B100s and so on and so forth, each generation is going to be several times more efficient than the last generation. So if you've got a new system that has 4x the power at the same price, then you only need to add, 250,000 of them to get the power of 1 million H100s. And when you kind of think about it that way, the amount of compute they're going to have at their disposal is rising exponentially. They're adding more systems, and the systems at the same time are getting more powerful with each generation. So the road they're going down, they're going to be building massive, massive compute clusters just like XAI.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, especially when you talk about Optimus. But with regards to just speaking about FSD stateside, is kind of what I was referencing. But yeah, with Optimus, I think that's a no-brainer. I imagine, I don't know what all the governance rules are outside of North America or the EU, but I imagine that there's going to have to be some type of data locality for governance reasons. I know the GDPR is very strict about that. UK has their own things. Obviously, we see what's happening with China. So I do wonder how that data governance is going to work. And I would doubt that everything will be centrally located with Cortex in Texas. I could be wrong, but it'll be interesting to see how all this plays out.
Sorry, can I ask a quick question here? Because I don't know where else I would ask. I can't go to an analyst and ask this, but maybe somebody in the space can help. If you build one, so in the past you couldn't build more than 30, 40,000 H100 GPU cluster. Elon proved that he can do 100 and now 200, and he's working on a million. My question is so are you saying, Hallmark, that you can tie it all together? And the reason I'm like, I don't quite understand this, and that's not my background, is can you take a 200, or sorry, a 30 and a 30 and a 30 and just keep piling it on top? What's the purpose of building a whole 100 or 200, 1 million? Does the when you build a 1 million, does it not make the 100,000 H100 cluster irrelevant? Do you understand what I mean?
Well, think of it as a bunch of computers, right? So the computers can all work together. When you add more computers, it doesn't make your old computers worthless. They can do other things. And there's a lot of different things to do. It's not like it's all one training job. There's different training jobs, there's engineers running different experiments, there's inference, right? When you actually go to x.com or grok.com, GPUs have to be used to inference the model. They have to be used for training. When you have voice features, that takes a lot more compute power to inference than just text. So there's always something to use the compute for. It never just becomes useless. And there's more than just one big training job for the model. There's all kinds of different tasks that they're using the compute cluster for.
Interesting. Okay, so yeah, So yeah, you won't use it for the ultimate training, but there's so many other training tasks, multitasking you can use it for. Okay, thanks.
Okay. I mean, I think the big point from yesterday was how fast they were able to scale, and why scale does matter, because they've shown that scaling does translate to smarter AI, and how fast they can do it. It's just unbelievable. 92 days to get the next 100,000 on top of the other first 100,000, which took 122 days. And then he explained how these are not just simple data centers. There's energy packs. They use mega packs as their solution to try to even out the power draws that was happening. So it's unbelievable what they did, how quickly it is. And then that just allows them to get more, build more. And the proof is that the more actually does result in real more intelligence. So
Herbert,
Yeah.
Herbert, and if I can go ahead, Omar.
Yeah, this should be a wake-up call for Tesla investors, because what they showed here is that dominance in AI is essentially going to be a function of industrial expertise. They went in here and they said, you hear people talking all the time about, oh, well, someone else is going to catch up to FSD in no time. Well, how are you going to say that when in the LLM space, they were years behind? They started from nothing and they leapfrogged everyone else. They talked on the call about going to the cloud providers, because companies like OpenAI and Anthropic, they don't obviously run their own data centers. They go to a cloud provider like Amazon or Microsoft and they say, hey, you build the compute cluster, you set everything up, and you give us access and we'll use it. And that works well for them. But when xAI went to the cloud providers and said, hey, when can you get us a 100,000 GPU cluster? And they said, well, we can do it in 18 to 24 months. They said, shit, in 18 to 24 months, it's going to be over. Get a building, start building those servers, bring in the cooling, let's do it ourselves. And they did it so fast that even Jensen was like, holy cow, I didn't even know you could do that. And that expertise he has, I mean, this is a guy who builds rockets, who builds electric cars. Your soft-handed Silicon Valley programmers who are just accessing the NVIDIA node over SSH on Amazon Cloud are, it's a very different thing when you're physically bringing these servers in. So that industrial knowledge allowed them to scale up the data center faster and come out with a model first that beat everyone else. So when you look at Tesla, when you look at the real world AI that they're training, that same thing is going to apply, I think, where they're able to train models, they're able to scale up compute faster than anybody else. I mean, you look at some of their peers, they don't even have GPU clusters, obviously, which is why they're going to have to sort of ultimately, I think, license from somebody else. If this is sort of an industrial process, companies like Tesla and AI are going to excel because this is what they know how to do. They know how to build physical industrial machines. And increasingly in AI, that's really all that matters.
Simon, did you have a comment on that?
No, just that's a really good point. It really has to do with total integration, virtual integration. Like you think about Tesla, and they virtually integrated their AI, their hardware, software stack within the vehicle. And then you think that AI and LLMs are just a commodity, but they've taken it upon themselves, XAI, to build their own compute because they realize if they wait for somebody else to do it, it's going to be more expensive and it's going to take too much time. But just back to the point of what we saw yesterday, I just want to reiterate how important it is that none of these companies doing LLMs are profitable. None of them are making money. They all require capital and a massive amount of capital they're trying to raise. So, and I've never heard of companies talking about raising this amount of capital, and they're all competing. So what XAI did yesterday was a total smackdown on the capital markets industry in terms of who's investing in this. And if I were an allocator and I'm looking, which I am, and I want to invest in AI, this is the hottest space in the market right now, how likely am I to throw some money at somebody else's number two right now after what we saw yesterday? So I think that's what yesterday was about. But I get excited because it's like another Elon Musk company total smackdown on the industry of whatever industry they're competing on.
Exactly. Hey, Sat, go ahead.
Yeah, one thing I want to piggyback off is that Tesla was not the leader in EVs. The Nissan Leaf was. So Elon has come back from being the underdog, actually, that wasn't making it. But because, and this is the thing I think everyone misses, that it's his rate of innovation and to question like certain ways of doing things and to find the fastest way of doing it and the most efficient way of doing it is first principles. And that's what I think if you're investing in like XAI or Tesla, that's what you're really investing in, because it's not about like finding just the talented people and whatnot. There's plenty of talented people in that field, whether it's the humanoids or LLMs or electric vehicles. But it's the leader who has to put them together. And so when you see the rate of innovation and Grok 3 just like jumping forward from everyone else and in a much shorter time, it's because the leadership is strong. And so when you're doing this kind of analysis, it's not just about, okay, they were able to do the technical part. It's that he literally was building something that even NVIDIA and other people in the industry did not think was possible, making all the servers and whatnot, right? You still had it in front of the Giga Texas. And so he's combining the hardware part of it, that it's usually the hindrance, and then not letting it be a hindrance for the speed of the LLMs to train. So I think people miss the fact that it's Elon that you're investing in, his way of doing things. That's what enables everyone else to do the best and the potential of the talents.
I've created a website that is the most comprehensive resource for the Tesla investor. Please check it out. Simply go to my website at herbertong.com.